Deep Rock Galactic has a reputation for being one of the best co-op shooters ever made, but 7 years after launch, does it still hold up? I had no idea, so I decided to jump back in to find out. I wanted to see how the gameplay feels today, how the new gear and missions shake things up, and whether the solo experience is actually worth your time. And of course, we'll also talk about the stuff it still gets wrong. Greetings and welcome friends, I'm Ash, and let's dig in, pun very much so intended, and see if this game still rocks.
Rockin' stone!
One of my biggest surprises when revisiting Deep Rock Galactic in 2025 was just how welcoming the community is. Normally, the longer a game's been around, the more insular and elitist the player base becomes. Case in point, my most common interaction in Dota 2 is being told I should go play Frogger in real life. And yet, even when I was shaking off years of rust and doing my best impression of a carpet, face down on the floor and really just kinda tying the caves together, every player I met was chill, patient, and supportive. No one complained, no one got salty. And when I say no one, I really do mean it. I didn't have a single grumpy game. In fact, most groups were down for some good old-fashioned shenanigans, whether that meant spamming rock and stone after every minor success like we had just won a war, or simply breaking into a dance party before the mission had even started. That kind of camaraderie is very rare, and honestly, kind of heartwarming. It is also a huge part of what makes Deep Rock Galactic so easy to jump into, even this many years after launch. Another thing I didn't really appreciate back in the day, but immediately did this time around, was solo play. Can you imagine that? A multiplayer game that actually lets you play alone. Just wander around, learn the ropes, explore the maps, and just kinda chill. What a wild concept! And not only does Deep Rock Galactic have a solo mode, it's actually really good. Your AI companion Bosco does everything a regular player would. He mines distant minerals, blasts bugs into pieces, revives you when you get munched on, and naturally randomly wanders off so you get munched on all over again. He even salutes you back. It is adorable. I didn't spend too long in solo mode once I got my sea legs back, or I suppose cavern legs really, but just having it there made a huge difference. It gave me a very comfy place to experiment, a place to get familiar with the new gear, and most importantly, a place to remember how not to detonate myself with a satchel charge. Mostly. Speaking of gear, DRG very clearly went for quality over quantity with its new additions. Each dwarf only got one new primary, one new secondary, and one new grenade. But every single one is a blast to mess around with and brings a very unique spin on their playstyle. My favorite ended up being the Driller's Corrosive Sludge Pump, a glorious gloop gun that fires huge globs of acidic slime. You can tag enemies directly to slow and damage them, or just splooge all over the terrain to create a disgusting, toxic carpet the swarms will have to squeeze through to get to your team. What impressed me the most is how it fills a very similar role to the flamethrower, namely area denial, yet still feels completely different. It is slower, more deliberate, way messier, but again, no less powerful. On top of new gear, DRG also added a bunch of overclocks over the years, weapon upgrades that can very dramatically alter how your toys behave. Some of them are so wild you can barely even recognize the original gun underneath. Case in point, I never really cared for the gunner back in the day. Neither of his two primary weapons really clicked with me, so I figured I would test out his new thingamabobs for the video and then move on. And that is when I discovered mortar rounds for the heavy autocannon. This beautiful monstrosity turns a slow and honestly kinda boring weapon into what I can only describe as a Gatling mortar. Hanging from a zipline and arcing shell after shell into a swarm below is absurdly satisfying. And the sheer chaos, it is glorious. Half the time, you cannot even see what you're shooting at. It's just smoke, explosions, and the constant sound of your scout yelling at you. That one overclock completely turned me around on the gunner and reminded me just how much depth there is when you really start digging into the upgrade system. Unfortunately, overclocks are also DRG's biggest problem, and one that has only gotten worse over the years. And the problem is, there is no way to target the specific ones you actually want. You only get a handful of random overclocks each week, and that is it. So if you like the sound of mortar rounds, there is a very real chance you might not see them, even after months of active play. And that sucks a lot. For a game that's so player-focused, and I'll get into that in a moment, this system feels oddly hostile. It's not like DRG is some microtransaction-riddled hellhole where they need you glued to the screen 24/7. It is a very chill co-op shooter you play because it is fun. So why gate some of the most exciting content behind such slow, frustrating RNG? I genuinely do not get it. Overclocks still cost rare resources to craft, so it's not like letting players pick would remove the incentive to play. It would just make each mission all the more rewarding. I can only hope the developers come around on this, because the overclocks are the one system that feels completely out of sync with the rest of DRG. And this brings me to one of my biggest surprises, the way DRG handles its battle passes. You know how most games treat battle passes like a second job. Play every day, complete a bunch of dailies, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get to own one cool cosmetic by the end of the season. Yeah, Deep Rock Galactic does not do that. You get each battle pass completely free, and you can complete it at your own pace. And best of all, they never expire. So if you want to go back and finish a previous season, it is just a couple of clicks and boom, you are back in time. Other players can still join your games and vice versa. The only difference is the seasonal events you'll run into along the way. And if you mostly join random lobbies like I do, this gives the gameplay a nice bit of variety without ever really splitting the community. Speaking of variety, I am very happy to say that DRG has added a bunch of new missions, enemies, and modifiers over the years. Maybe not as many as I would have liked, as I saw most of them within my first week back. But the ones that are here are all top-notch, so honestly, I cannot really complain. My favorite new mission is the one where you first triangulate the location of a giant Morkite geode, and then you ride the appropriately titled Drill-Evator straight into its very core. The mission itself is a blast, but the real highlight? Jet boots. Previously locked behind a pretty underwhelming perk, the new jet boots let you soar through the caves at breakneck speeds and explore to your heart's content. It is silly, it is fun, and it is exactly the kind of over-the-top nonsense DRG does so well. Another fun mission, and I'm fairly certain I'm alone on this given how everyone else always seemed to try to rush through it, is the Overseer boss. I really like this one because I cooked up a crazy idea. I'll use my drills to position myself above the boss, and then instead of doing the fight fairly, I'll just drop satchel charges directly onto its head. I was worried this would trigger some sort of shield or defensive measure, as games generally hate it when you try to cheese them. But much to my delight, nothing of the sort ever happened. DRG was perfectly content to reward me for creative play, even if this meant I trivialized much of the boss. And I really do appreciate games that let me do that kind of stuff. As for the enemies, I've run into quite a few new faces since I last played, though I would be lying if I said I could name them. The bugs all just kinda blur together until you meet one of the eldritch horror things that spawn from literal rifts in reality. I do not know what those things are, but I have a sneaking suspicion they might just play a very big role in the upcoming Rogue Core spin-off. On the difficulty side, DRG hasn't added any new tiers beyond Hazard 5, but they have introduced optional modifiers to spice things up. Tougher enemies, more numerous swarms, and that kind of stuff. I'm gonna be honest with you, I will not be toggling these on every single mission, but they are a very nice way to turn up the heat without ever having to resort to modding your game and thus losing a lot of potential teammates in the process. And finally, let's talk about DLC, because if there is one thing modern gaming has taught me, it's that 120 euros worth of it is usually a very, very bad sign. Thankfully, DRG once again bucks the trend. Yes, it does sell DLC, but they're all cosmetic. And no, none of them are essential. Now, before any of you get angry, don't get me wrong. Locking the coolest outfits behind a paywall still kinda sucks. But DRG strikes a very good balance here. The paid cosmetics are purely optional, and the free ones are very plentiful, easily earnable, and often quite fancy in their own right. You'll unlock them from the in-game shop, seasonal events, caches mid-mission, and even just by leveling up your gear. The important thing is that at no point did I ever feel like I was missing out by not opening my wallet. And that, honestly, might be the biggest compliment I can give DRG and its developers. They could have gone full goblin mode and locked everything behind DLC. Instead, they just made a good game and let people enjoy it. And that sort of thing is not only a rare sight to see these days, it is borderline legendary. So, does Deep Rock Galactic still hold up in 2025? Yeah, honestly, a lot more than I expected. It's not the flashiest game out there, and sure, some systems like the random overclock grind are long overdue for an overhaul. But the core of it? That satisfying loop of mining, blasting bugs, and screaming rock and stone every 2 seconds, that is just as fun today as it was 7 years ago. More importantly, DRG feels like a game that actually respects its players. Your time, your money, and your creativity. You don't see that very often, and I think that is a very big reason why the community has stayed so strangely wholesome over the years. So whether you're dropping in for the very first time, or coming back to see what's new like I did, I would say now's a pretty good time to head underground. The roguelike spin-off Rogue Core is set to launch later this year. That's probably going to be a pretty big deal, so why not take the opportunity to get familiar with the original? Enjoy, and just remember, you don't throw satchel charges nearly as far as you might think. Oof, trust me on that one. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, hit the stupid bell, pet your favorite beard, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you for sticking to the very end, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye!